want to talk a little bit about Oracle Financial Services Limited. Now, Oracle Financial Services has been reporting muted numbers, a little bit of a sleepy company. The compounded sales growth over the last 5 years for OFSS was just 5%. And suddenly this quarter, we had blockbuster numbers, 26% revenue growth quarter on quarter, year on year, very strong margins, license sales shot through the roof. What happened? What changed for the company in this quarter? Should we just say it's a lumpy business? And what will be the sustainable growth for the company going ahead?
I think there are a number of things happening. We basically, if you look at the overall landscape, there are Gen 1 core banking systems out there, the FISs and the Fiservs of the world that have been in existence for the last 40, 50 years. Very old technologies, they lack a lot of talent even out there that can handle that. Then there were a series of Gen 2 companies that I would classify as Temenos and Finacle and so on and so forth. And then there's a whole new slew of cloud native companies, but the vast majority of them are small. We are one of the companies that is building cloud native applications. And this is a very fundamental shift. If I take you back to my original point of what these companies have to do, these banks have to do to compete with the born in cloud fintechs, is they have to fundamentally relook at their architecture. They have to find ways to introduce new products and services to the market very quickly, be more hyper-personalized to their end consumer. And they can't do that with the legacy. Each time they have to release a new product, it takes them a year to code around it because of the fact that they're mired in that old technology. Frankly, many of the techs that exist today didn't even exist when those old systems were written, right? Mobility didn't exist, social technologies didn't exist, IoT didn't exist, AI was just theoretical, right? So now these new companies are born that way, banks are competing, and they have to relook at their architecture. So now I'm going to come back to your question. So the reason why we are starting to see tremendous momentum is that we have invested very heavily in taking our vast breadth and depth of product portfolio to a cloud native framework, which means we've modernized the architecture, writing of the first line of code. This is not putting veneers around it and putting it on a third-party public cloud. These have been engineered for the cloud from the ground up. They're completely microservices based. They have user experiences that are modern. They are completely API based, so they can work in an ecosystem of products, which is also one of the areas where the regulators are going. And they basically are hyper scalable. I mean, very recently we won a deal in the United States, large bank with 12 million customers, about 160 billion in assets. They were using one of the older platforms, and they basically tested us to the limit in scalability. We were able to demonstrate benchmarks that were going into the 100,000 transactions per second, right? And 2,000 concurrent transactions per second. Again, a bit of technical jargon here, but this scale is important in this new world where more and more transactions go.
This shows Oracle's readiness. It takes two sides to close in a deal.
Yeah.
Right? So Oracle is all ready to provide next generation technology, and it's been tested, it's scalable, and everything that you said.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, you also need the companies, the banks, the financial services willing to make that investment, and you are competing with other players,
yeah.
right? You name Temenos, for instance. What is your market share? And again, getting back to the growth, have we reached that inflection point in the Indian financial sector or in the financial sector? Can we continue to see the kind of growth rates that we've seen in Q3 continue?
So I think growth is dependent on a number of things. There are always external factors, macroeconomic trends, and so on and so forth. So I think what you said is right. We are ready. We have the next generation of application. And frankly, we don't consider that Temenos is in that business, right? Temenos is definitely in the second generation of application. And the kind of companies that you see in this third generation, they're really small, right? They don't have the R&D. They can't invest in broadening their portfolio, reaching the customer base, adding AI capabilities from the ground up. As a company, we spend north of $7 billion in R&D every single year, right? So we take advantage of that R&D in building these capabilities. So I believe the growth will be determined by how the macroeconomic spend will happen. I believe that banks are now really aggressively addressing a progressive modernization agenda. So they're not willing to do a complete sweeping change of everything they've got. They'll take pieces of the puzzle and they'll continue to modernize because that's what that's what their risk appetite is right now. And for that, you need a componentized architecture.
But you are seeing a switch in the acceptance of the banks, your clients, your customers,
100%.
compared to 6 or 8, 1 year ago.
I think maybe I would say compared to 2 years, 3 years ago, I think the pandemic was definitely a defining factor. They realized that it was time to change because the volumes were growing up and their existing infrastructure.
But yet in FY23, it's not that the revenue growth for the company was very high. It was about 9-10% on the top line.
Yeah, but you see, these deals don't necessarily happen and come to fruition in a month, right? When someone describes an intent, they have to build all the internal support for it. Boards have to be convinced, budget outlays have to be made, RFPs have to be floated. So my belief is that we'll see more and more of the banks start to look at modernization agendas, and they'll do it in core banking, they'll do it in financial crime. We've had a series of wins in recent months.
Every now and then there is this rumor in the market about delisting of Oracle Financial Services. What is the thought process of the board on this point?
It's really not something we've discussed, to be very honest. We don't see the
Do you see merit in delisting the company?
Not really. I think the company has a large number of minority shareholders.
Your holding is 72-73%.
Yeah,
as in the parent company.
The parent company has 73% roughly, and that's a matter of public record. And the rest of it is afloat in the market, and we think that we are well served with the current structure. So we haven't really had, I've been on the board for many years, roughly 10 years, and we've never really had to have that conversation with any intensity. So.
And what is the cash utilization strategy? Because the company generates a lot of free cash flow every single year.
Yeah.
In the past, you've done some buybacks, but every year you have a pretty hefty dividend that you give your shareholders. What is the cash utilization strategy, capital allocation strategy?
So I think, there are various ways where any company, utilizes cash. They do buybacks, they pay dividends, they do acquisitions, they do expansions. The nice thing about OFSS is it has a parent which is very strong operationally, and they have.
But do you have a dividend policy? How much you want to pay out every year?
We declare every year.
Every year you declare? But
yeah, in the last few years, you can see the record. We've been declaring very healthy dividends, and I attend the AGMs, and the shareholders are very, very happy. And so, when we find the right acquisition opportunities, we will do that. But the fact of the matter is, we can do that one of two ways. We can buy the company through Oracle. We can buy the company through OFSS. That's really our corporate strategy, which will come into play depending upon the circumstance. So we'll use the same capital allocation strategies that are traditional in this regard. Right now, we are very much focused on returning to shareholders through dividends.
And are you scouting for any acquisitions? I know it's always on the radar.
Yeah.
You will never turn away from an opportunity, but is there something on the table right now?
There always is something on the table, and we continue to stay focused on that because the opportunity to expand addressable market is there. And we look at a lot of inbounds, we look at some outbounds, but the fact of the matter is that while money was very cheap, the valuations were quite extensive, and so we haven't really found really great cases where the value of the asset was well represented. So we'll see what the future brings.
Sunny, thank you very, very much for speaking to us.
It was my pleasure. Thank you for having me on.